Hi everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to People Matters TV. This is our 5th show, and I'm so excited to welcome you all in this conversation with leaders across the world on a weekly conversation to again look at what are the challenges that we're facing as an HR community and how can we increase our impact in business. So today we have a fantastic topic. I think we've been covering a lot of conversations on digital transformation and functional areas of digital transformation. And today we wanted to focus on one area which is a big concern in the community, which is really leveraging HR technology and the key of cracking the whole adoption. And I may actually want to argue that it's not adoption, but it's more about people in the organization really loving the products as much as they love consumer tech. So we have the privilege to have with us two of our leader panelists. We have Dr. Finn Mylackart. He's the managing partner with Gujin. He's a consulting firm that helps building holistic corporate culture. So Dr. Finn has tremendous experience on helping organizations leverage diversity in culture and using technology as a lever to be able to bring people together and create a culture of performance and innovation. So Dr. Finn, a very, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have with us as well Bambang Yapri. He's the Human Capital Director with Samora Usaha Makmur. He brings over 18 years experience working in different HR functional areas in people management system, coaching across different industries. So he's working manufacturing, retail, pharma, and he specializes on cross-functional teams, really, again, looking at how technology can help teams be more effective and more collaborative. So thank you so much, Bambam, for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So when we were looking at this topic, I think one of the big paradigms that we have is, on the one hand, employees today live in a context of technology being so pervasive, and all of us use technology, whether it's to book a cab or to communicate with our families, and it's everywhere in our social life. And in many cases, when we enter the workplace, somewhere it's back to the future, where we are now managing technology that looks more like early 90s or maybe early 2000s. But there is definitely a disconnect between the technology that we use outside of work and the technology that we use inside of work. So my first question to both of you is to just reflect a little bit about why is this disconnect? Before we get into HR technology adoption, I'd love to hear your perspective about why is there such a wide disconnect between my experience as a consumer, when I interact with technology outside of work, and when I enter the workplace. Why is that gap widening actually so much?
So who do you want to start?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Finn, please.
I think it's an extremely interesting observation that there is this gap between how we adopt technology and how we let technology into our lives. And I'm quite skeptic about that we adopt technology just because we can. And I've been an advocate for the humans in the digitalized world for a very long time. So I'm not absolutely certain that it's a good idea that we adopt as much technology as we can just because we can.
Yeah.
But if you're going back to your initial question about why we have this gap between adoption of technology at the workplace and the technology we have in private life, personally, I think it's a lot to do with that many of the legacy systems we have in corporate life and the structure and the legal constraints and that surround the corporations that it doesn't make it so easy to change so rapidly. I would say if you buy a device for yourself and it does turn out to be what you expected, it doesn't have a huge impact. You can just get another one or skip it. But if you make that huge transformation in a company and it turns out to be not the right decision, it has a huge impact on the entire organization and the profitability of the company.
Thank you. Thanks, Finn. Yes, go ahead, Babam. You want to add on that as well? Or should I move to what are the challenges? Why are we stuck with legacy systems? And Finn, you mentioned about the cost of choosing the wrong products, and also the whole legal implication as well, and how the context is so different. Yes, Babang, you want to add on what are the challenges?
Yeah, I want to add on how that we see the technology in the HR area. But before, when you're talking about consumer technology, we have a push and pull factors when we are adopting a new technology. Somehow it doesn't happen for let's say the whole segments of the consumers.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of the technology suite with some segment of the tech doesn't really happen in the company, because in the company we try to adopt that with the whole people in the organization, and it takes another perspective, another point of view, because if you know, nowadays we have 4 to 5 different generation at workplace, and their adoption to the technology is different. So they have to learn. We usually call them as an immigrant to the digital technology, but some of them are the native digital expert, because already use some of the apps, they use the for games or whatsoever. So it's a different environment that we have at the workplace. So I think that's one of the things that it's not really easy, that we see that customer technology, but it doesn't mean that we can really adopt that in the organizations.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much, Babang. So when I'm reflecting about your point about multi-generational individuals that we are serving within the organization, what are the things that we can learn from consumer products? Because some of those consumer products have really been able to penetrate across different generational levels, you know, and I think, as you correctly said, some of them were digital natives, some of them were digital immigrants, but they've been able to actually attract. So what are some of the learnings that we can gather from the success of some of the domestic consumer tech products, and can help us reflect about how we can use some of those learnings in the context of HR technology adoption in the corporate?
Yeah, so in my point of view, especially in Indonesia, we can see that the access to the data or the internet penetrations is not by percentage, is not, as they are really have a tech savvy on using that. So that's one of the things, or one of the point that we have to see, because in my experience, we have a different geographical area in Indonesia, and each of the area doesn't have the same level of data access. So think about how that we can move around from those problem. And the other things, I think that we have to see what's in it for me for each of them, so then we can get the expert, become the influencer for those who is the digital migrant, how that they can show to them that this is can be better, this can be easier for you, and whatsoever. So it's like you have a skeptical persons, but you also have the early adapters, and how that we can mix and blend that, so it can be easier for the organization to adopt the technology.
Wonderful. So I'm going to come to you, Bang, with specific examples that you can share with us on some of the technology adoption that you've done, and how you've been able to overcome that what's in it for me question mark. So I'll come back to you with some examples. But before I do that, Phil, what has been your experience when it comes to some of the principles to really crack this technology adoption, understanding again back to what works in the consumer product and how can we learn from that? What has been some of the learnings that you want to share with all of us?
So some of the major learnings is I like to play the devil's advocate here. And when we come to adoption of technology, you always have two kinds of people and a lot of people in between. You have one kind of people who are very excited about the new technology. I want to adopt it, and they don't have any thoughts about anything else like privacy or how it influences the way that we are together as human beings. And then you have another group at the other end of the scale who are very late adopters or no adopters at all, because that they are just rejecting the development of new technologies and the adoption of new technologies. So my experience is kind of mixed, and that's also what we work with in my company, Google, is trying to figure out how does we as human beings, how do we fit into that transformation into a more digitalized world? Because I really honestly believe, and I can see with the companies that we've been working with, that companies who are adopting technology too fast without thinking about the people working in the companies, without thinking about their clients, that they end up with state-of-the-art technology, but they have lost all the people.
Yeah.
And then the other end, you can have companies who are can be very mature companies who are very late adopters with technology because they rely on their experience and, oh, we have always been doing things that way. And then they end up going out of business for that reason. So you can go out of business for two reasons. Either because you adopt too fast or either because you adopt too late. And that's why the cultural transformation you need to have in the company, and that's our specialty in our company, has to follow the transformation of the digital transformation, that they have to go together.
Very nice. Thank you. Thanks, Finn. And I'm again going to stay with you for some examples that you want to share with us. Maybe it will be awesome if you could share maybe a failure example, specific on, what can we learn from that failure that you saw, and maybe a success example. And again, what can we learn from it? Can you share some specific example? You don't necessarily have to mention the organization name, but as much you can paint the picture for us to learn from that experience. Yeah.
For instance, we work a lot with the aviation industry around the world on how they can adopt technology to provide a better solutions for not only their clients and customers, but also for the employees in tackling everything they have to do in that complex operation of running an airport or running an airline. And a good example here is that the way that they have been able to, because of digital transformation, that it's possible for them to have a lot more information about passengers boarding the plane. It's possible for them to have a lot more information about everything, all the information that the passengers need, so that they can provide a much better customer service to the passengers on board the planes and when they're boarding the plane than they could before. And that has a lot of positive side effects that it can. First of all, it gives the passengers a better experience and the feel that we actually are doing things better here. And it saves a lot of time for the staff on board the plane and on the airport, so that they can focus on other things as well.
Very nice, thank you. Yes?
Yeah, and if I had to come with an example where it has gone wrong, it's in areas where companies are adopting technology very, very fast, especially when they're using artificial intelligence, which is happening a lot in the legal area, along law firms. It's happening in pharmaceuticals, where we have seen that a lot of people have been very skeptical and become very depressed and left the company, because we human beings, we have a basic need for having heroes. We need to look up to someone. We need to look up to that person who have been there for many years and knows everything. And we want to become like that person. But what if that person is not a person, but a system, an artificial intelligence system that is much better than any of the employees? So it works actually as a demotivation factor for the rest of the people. So that's why we need to have a human aspect into it. And that's why we need to develop the culture at the same time as we're developing the technology.
Very nice. Thank you. Thanks, Finn. And I'm going to come to you for more inputs about how do you pace that change and what works for different, and what have you learned in your journey of working with organizations across the world on what's the right pace. And I know there's no silver bullet for that, but I'm going to come to you for some insights on that. So before I do that, let me ask you, Bambang, your example. And you talked about what's in it for me as a starting point. And I think a lot of times as HR practitioners, we probably put HR at the center. What is it that we need as HR from the technology? And sometimes we miss the point that the technology has to be for the employees and not necessarily for HR. So I really am very intrigued to understand one example where you were able to move from what's in it for me from business alone and from HR alone, but really looking at the target audience or the consumer at the center. Any success story that you like to share with us on successful implementation of HR technology? And if you're comfortable to share an example of maybe not so successful, and what is it that you learned from it, that would be also fantastic.
Yeah, so one of the examples that I would like to share with all of you here is about the learning process.
Yeah.
So now we are getting into the blended learning, that we have all the tech savvy things and all the curriculum and then all the knowledge management. Then we come to the question why that we have to have in-class session and how that of learning. So that's always a dilemma, because people will say that if we have an in-class session, then we can have a engagement, a chit chat in the room, so we dig more on the other experiences. But then why that we have to be in the same classroom?
Yeah.
So that's a big question. What would be the value added? So that comes in class that we have a blended learning, and we will define when they were in the classroom what kind of value added that they will have, and what kind of things that they can learn. Conversation actually come when we design the learning program, and we let the audience, all the participants and also the stakeholders knows that this new approach will reduce face-to-face sessions, and from their point of view, it means that more productivity for work or for other things at the workplace. So those kind of things that will help them understand that you cannot travel to other cities or you cannot travel to the headquarters, because sometimes it's also the pride that they have that, oh, I was sent to the headquarters for this training and whatsoever. But then you still can go to the headquarters, but you have to prepare yourself much better, especially for the knowledge before you get into the class. So that's one of the things when we are talking about the plus point, or what is in it for me, for the management and also for the participants of the leadership or the development program that we have. So that's one thing. And when you also tap on the also it's not only because the technology, but it's also about the content itself. Sometimes when we are talking about how that we use the technology for performance management, sometimes it's we define the performance management itself. So that's another challenge that we have. So we are not only talking about the context, but it's also the content itself. So when the environment has changed and everything has changed, we cannot still have the same content from the same point of view when the technology disrupt the process. So I think that's some points or in the HR technologies. And I think it's also happened in the consumer technology. If I want to share a story that when in our country, we adopt the ATM or automatic teller machines. So we have that, I think. Then it's a huge investment for the bank actually for having one ATM at that moment. And then it's actually in a suburbs or a small city. That's one of the client of the bank come, and then the teller that will come to the tellers. But then he is very angry at that moment when he received the money. Actually, he already count the money, but it's correct, but he's still angry. So he want to meet the head of the branch, and the teller asks why that you are not satisfied with us, because I can see that you have get all the process done, and you have the right amount of money that you want to get. And he just simply say, I deposit money in your bank in a clean and a neat one, but this money is not that clean, it's not that neat as I deposit in your bank. So it's a kind of silly things, but it happened. So it's about educating and giving the environment or the ecosystem to adopt to that technology.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that couple of examples. And I'm coming to you on the pace, and we heard examples from Bang Bang both on the learning front, and then we heard an example on the performance management. And I think there's a question from the audience as well about how do we get employees as part of that culture change. And you talked about two kinds of people within the organization that we need to engage with. The people who are going to be excited about this change and people who are not going to be so excited, they're going to be skeptical on that change. So how do we get more and more people from the organization, our employees, to be part of that culture change and to really become champions? And the question goes to even ask, how do we create an incentive of sorts to make it meaningful for them as well? So any examples on that you could share?
Yeah, and I agree with Bang Bang. It's like when we're talking about change, we don't like change. When people are talking about change management and change readiness, they're usually talking about everyone else is changing.
Yeah, but not
us, because change is associated with risk, and we human beings, we are risk averse. So the people who are developing these new technologies to be implemented in companies for HR purposes, they're not the people who are going to change themselves, because they have the excitement, they can see what they do. But the people who this technology is affecting, they feel the fear. They feel the fear that they will lose their job to a system. They feel that they will become redundant. And when we have fear, it's very difficult to see how we can move forward, actually. But people are lying to their bosses, people are lying to their colleagues. They will say to their bosses and colleagues, oh, it's great with that new technology. But on a personal level, they feel the fear, but they cannot say that publicly. So you will have an intrinsic resistance in the organization towards change, especially when it comes to introduction of new technology. And that's where the culture is very, very important, because one of the key purposes of a corporate culture is to make the employees feel comfortable, because the culture has to change all the time, because the world outside is changing. We get new technologies, a lot of things are happening. So when we can create that culture, and that has a lot to do with leadership, it has a lot to do with motivation and reward, it has a lot to do with how you actually treat people when no one is looking. It's all about that. So if you have a culture that you have developed over time, where people feel sure, if my leader tells me that that's the way we are going to do things in the future, I trust that leader, because in the previous times where we have went through changes, despite that we went into a zone of uncertainty, we came out on the other side stronger than we were before. And when we have that confidentiality within us, that's what we can do. That I follow my leader. I always use the example by that we follow the minesweeper through the minefield, which we would never go through ourselves, but we trust the minesweeper because the previous time we have followed that minesweeper, we got through the minefield safely. So it all comes back to leadership.
Yeah.
And when we have leaders who can take the organization through that transformation process, upgrade people's skills, move them from one job function that's going to be automated by technology and up-qualify them to a new job function, be safe in that process, then they will be willing to take the risk and follow the leader through the transformation process. Unfortunately, there are not that many leaders who are like that. You have people who are very excited about the technology, and then they expect everyone else to be excited too, and it's not happening. And that actually answers your very first question in this session. Why is it that adoption of technology is so much slower in organization than it is in private life? And that's for exact that reason. So developing the right culture is a starting point.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that point on leadership and trust as a foundation for change, and whether that change is technology or any other change. So let me take a question as well from the audience, and I think, Finn, it goes very well on what you just mentioned. On some of the times, we will not see the results short term. So how do you keep that momentum when we're going through a change process, and we will not necessarily see the results on the short term, but the results will actually come in the midterm, or maybe some things even in the long term. How can we keep that momentum, especially when we're looking at change which is driven by technology adoption? What are the measures that we can look at just to see that actually we're moving the needle? What are some of the milestones that we can look at to make sure that we are keeping that positive momentum in the journey of change? Any examples, Finn Bambang, that you want to share with us, or any stories really on how do you keep the momentum of change when you don't necessarily going to see the outcome of positive results in the short term? Positive results being a measure of not only business outcomes, but even for the perspective of change for the employees themselves. Sometimes life gets a bit worse before it gets better. So how do we keep that momentum?
Yeah, so I agree with Dr. Finn when we are talking about leaderships and culture will the adoption of HR technology as part of the change in the organizations.
Yeah.
And the leaders will appreciate or celebrate even it's a small success or it's just a step or a milestone, but then it can bring a huge impact for the motivations and also the confidence of the teams that we will have. So those kind of ambience or culture will help the change happen, because then if we get into the so if there's some failures and whatsoever, we don't have to give an echo for that bad news. But if you have a good news or you have good things, it cannot go through all the organization. You have to have a massive or a great effort to share those celebrations or those success, even it's not a big things, or we say, oh, it's just a simple steps, but it's not a simple step because it gives impact to the whole aspect of the journey that we have. So how the change become bigger and bigger, like a snowball effect, that it happens as we expected. And another things, I think it's about when we are doing change. I think the change itself, but as Dr. Finn said, sometimes it's about losing control of what happened. So I don't have the knowledge, I have no skill about that. So it's about reskill the capability, because the ability that they have is irrelevant anymore. They are competent in that things, but it's irrelevant with the adoption of.
Yeah.
If they already have loss of control in that situation, please, for us, don't give them a situation that they are losing their face in. Two things from me.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to take Bang, your point, and Dr. Finn, you've also mentioned a lot of things, and I think there's a question here which is very specific to the two of you on for some organizations that maybe are embarking in a HR technology adoption, whatever is the success or failure that they have had in the past and the learnings, what would be your recommendation in terms of some of the steps? And you have covered some of them already in the conversation, but if you were to summarize saying, okay, if you're entering in a HR technology adoption phase and you are looking at implementing a HR technology product, what are some of the steps that you need to bear in mind and to really break it down? It's a very complex process, but if you were to simplify it in some major steps that you need to consider to make it a higher chances to be successful, whether we will be successful or not, only time will tell, but what will be your recommendation of some of the steps that we must consider?
Well, for my part, it's about the topic I touched based on before, that the excitement that some people will have about that technology. The people who are selling the technology, they're usually selling the technology to people who are equally excited. But the people who are going to use it, or that would be a bit provocative, being the victims of the technology, they don't share the same excitement. So in order for a technology to become successful in an organization, for instance, in the recruiting process or in the learning environment or whatever part of the HR organization you want to use the technology, you need to include all the stakeholders in the decision process, and you need to have a culture in the organization where you value skepticism, because they're not skeptical because they don't want change. They're skeptical because they have a personal fear of losing their job. They have a personal fear of not feeling valued as a human being. Yeah. So by including all the stakeholders in the decision process or the strategy of where we are going with technology might take a little longer, because it's very easy when you have two excited people about something. Yeah, let's go for it. But you need to include everyone, all the stakeholders in the decision process, because that's the only way that you can get a buy-in for the people who are going to become the victims. Excuse my word.
Yeah.
Technology. But they can be convinced if you have the right culture, and if they feel that they are included in the decision process, they will go along with it, and you can get a much quicker adoption of the technology once the decision is made, if they have been involved in the decision process. And it's very important to acknowledge and respect that we're talking about human beings, and we human beings, we have emotions, we have fears, we also have aspirations and dreams, but when it comes to change, when people say word change, it really triggers the word risk and then fear in our minds. We don't like it. Just think about if we're going to a 2-day seminar, and when we come back on day 2, we sit in exactly the same seats as we sat in day 1, because even that small change we don't like. So we go back to the same seat as we had before the break or the day before. And what we were talking about, big changes like replacing the entire recruiting process in a company with artificial intelligence. And that's something that we've been working a lot with. We have developed systems where candidates can check themselves for cultural fit before skills fit. And even that small change in companies, we have felt resistance about that, and we're not even replacing anyone. We're just making sure that before they meet the candidate talking about skills, we know that there's a cultural fit between the candidate's personal preferences and the corporate culture. So when we're talking about big changes, then we need to be a lot more careful.
Wonderful, thank you. So that's a starting point, and I love that you mentioned about the step one is decision process itself. Before we even start we haven't even still yet even got started, but the decision process.
Everyone in the decision process.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I love your mentioning the user as a victim, because I think it's very, how do we move the user from being a victim to actually being a beneficiary? And that's kind of like a mindset shift that we have to.
Because if you look at it from a user perspective, we're also talking about being more productive and all that. But who does it actually benefit? Does it benefit me as an employee? No, it doesn't. It benefits the owners of the company. It might benefit the clients, but it doesn't benefit me.
That's right. That's right. Wonderful, wonderful. So that's one part. So let's imagine together that we've crossed that hurdle and we have made it an inclusive decision-making process. Now, what are the next steps? Bhavang, if you want to pitch in, and then please, Finn, also please keep building on each other's process.
So when we have decide on the change or the transformations, I would say that we already have all the system and whatsoever and what that we want to transform and everything. I learned that during the journey, most of the time we are talking about how is the technology works and what is the difference with the previous technology and whatsoever. Easier, but when the person is still wondering what is it about and whatsoever, so it's going to be a bit difficult. But for those who say no, then it's going to be another extra efforts that we will do during the transformation. So from those, I learned that after we decide on the transformation, the first things is about share the visions and share the why. Get that, and that's why it works also or sounds for me, then I will find out how. Because in nowadays it's not really easy to find how, but when we want to find why that we have to change, that's needs leaders model on how that we get through the journey. So in example, right, and when we are doing the HRIS things, and then we use ERP A, B, or C, whatsoever. But during the process, we more talk about how that we use this, and we start with this, the why, and people are wandering around. So I think that's the things for the next one after we decide on moving toward the change.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Bang Bang, for sharing that. And it's reminded me of a graph that I saw where in any change, especially on technology, there was this theoretical graph that was saying, okay, from efficiency perspective, we will see if you have time on one side and you have efficiency on the other side. When you're undergoing an implementation of a new technology, you will see a dip of efficiency for a little period of time, and then the efficiency will start going up, and the expected outcome after the implementation should be that the efficiency is actually higher than it was before. And what was interesting about that story was that sometimes we lose momentum in the implementation phase, and then we actually end up in a place where it's less efficient than what it was before we actually embarked in that technology change. So I love to get your inputs on how do we make, and I love your point about the why, and I love your point about making it inclusive. But the reality is that there is a fear that when we are undergoing that technology change, we will actually end up in a place where it's less efficient than before. So how do we keep that? What is the third step, which is keeping that momentum, keeping everyone's energy level at the same point? How do we then take it to? How do we make sure that that change is going to generate a higher efficiency, which was the why that you spoke about? At the end of the tunnel, we are going to end up in a better place than we were, because one of the big fear will be that we actually become less efficient after this whole investment of time and money.
Yeah, so that counts on the learning curve also, and also that's the one that you say is the valley of despair, that we are not going to make it and whatsoever. So I think there's also, technically we will talk about how that we do the rescaling, or not only about upscaling, but it's then about rescaling. So learn a new thing, learn a new, easy, and it's not for everybody. I will say that in the practicals area, we have to face the reality that we have some of them who say no. So we should concentrate on those the skeptical persons will join the wave of the change itself. So if you only concentrate on those who say no, a big no for me, then you will not have, and you give more of those resources to those who is excited and who want to know more, then we can bring those skeptical persons or who say no's into the change. But maybe you cannot take everyone, so you still have some of the person who say no's, but we are telling about the consequences, that you still have your capability, but your capability may irrelevant in the next couple of weeks or days or years after we implement or after we have this technology.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Finn, do you want to add to that as well?
Yes, and I really like Banbang's focus on why. And what I want to add to that part is that why is different for each individual in the entire organization. We might do the same things, but we do them for different reasons.
Yeah.
And that's very important when we're talking about corporate culture development, and when a leader is trying to talk his or her organization into go in a specific way, that we all do it for different reasons. But I really think it's a great point, including the why, because if there's no why and there's no reason, then we don't do it. When it comes to your question about why is it that the introduction of new technology sometimes, often actually, doesn't provide the boost in efficiency that we were looking at initially. I think it has a lot to do not only with people, but also that the people who are selling that technology are overselling that technology and what it can do for you. I might be a bit rude now, but a lot of these people who are selling that technology, they have absolutely no knowledge about the people transformation that is necessary for the technology to work properly. That there's no point in having the fastest car in the world if you have no people with a driver's license.
Yeah.
And that's often the part we forget. Yeah. The other reason why I think, and I can see when we're working with clients on that, is that we lose people in the transformation process, and that goes back to your initial question about how do we keep people engaged in that change process. Yeah. And that's why I think that's why it's so important to have people engaged from the entire organization, all the stakeholders engaged from the very, very beginning. Because if you're not engaged in the decision process from the very beginning, and you are half a year down the road and you haven't seen any results yet, the people who have not been engaged, they have a very good case when they go out in the organization shouting, see what we said, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Whereas if they have been engaged from the very beginning, they will be more patient, and they will will work along with you to make things happen.
Yeah.
But what is important in all change processes, no matter what change process it is to have quick wins all the time, so you can see these small changes that might not be the end solution, but you can see that we're moving in the right direction, implementing small changes that points in the right direction. So it gives you an indicator that you're actually moving.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Finn, for sharing that as well and giving that input. So this, I was running out of time, and it's so amazing that I'm just didn't even realize that we've been already live for over 45 minutes, and it's just. But I want to make sure I cover one question related to. There are two questions actually from the audience related to how do we choose the technology, and you mentioned that, Finn, about what is the kind of car that it makes sense to you, because in your context and your content and the business objectives that you're trying in the maturity level that you are as an organization, what kind of car and how do you even decide? Do you go with the traditional HR technology vendors, or do you go with the emerging consumer vendors that are also starting to have enterprise solutions? Do we build it in-house? What is your, and I know there is no one answer, but what are the things that we must consider when we're looking at choosing the right technology? What are some of the parameters that we need to take into consideration so we don't fall in the problem statement that you mentioned about buying a Ferrari and then realizing that I actually don't have the capability to drive it, or I don't have people with driving license. So how do we make sure we don't fall into that problem? What are some of the parameters to decide which technology works for our context?
Listen even more to the most skeptical people, because they're skeptical not because they just want to be negative. They're skeptical because they think. They're skeptical because they can see something that the excited salespeople can't see. So listen to the skeptics and don't neglect them, and don't tell them that they're just back thinkers. They're skeptical for a good reason.
Yeah. Okay. Any parameters, Bang, you want to share with us on how you have chosen technology in the past, and what is it that you personally look at to make sure that there's a good fit between the product and the need?
Okay, so I an illustration from a consumer technology. So I believe that everyone will have smartphone now, but if we remember how that the mobile phone transformed to the smartphone, it's a different way for each of the persons. But if they say, how do you use your smartphone? If they say, oh, I only use this for, so why I should have a smartphone? What will be the value added? What would be the difference if I buy a mobile phone compared to the smartphone if I only do it that for texting, for taking phones, and that's all. So in some situation, when we have the possibility to adopt the technology, but then we only have a 2G frequency or bandwidth, and also the bandwidth is not that big, how that we can adopt the technology with those limitations, but we still have the purpose on it. So I think how that we can make use of that technology is also another consideration. So I buy this because it's a lifestyle. I use this because my friend have this. In the organization, it doesn't happen like that. So that's the things that we will see. So when we say, oh, there's a trend that people are using AI for the organization. So I think those kind of exercise, and I agree that when we hear the skeptical persons telling about the reason and whatsoever, I think that's a good situation that we can listen to them, because then it gives us like a devil advocate for us, so we can analyze the pitfalls and we can measure actually I want this because I see other company are doing it, or I want this because the vendor are sharing with us about the uses and whatsoever. But do we really need this, and how that we can adopt this? So yeah, that's some of the insight or the experience that I have.
Thank you so much. So as we close, Finn, anything to add? Because I want to ask both of you as your closing advice for our viewers today that are have joined us to learn from your experiences about adopting technology. Maybe you could share your final advice to say, okay, what are your recommendations? Maybe something that you should start doing and something you should stop doing to make your HR technology adoption more successful for your organization.
Well, I can start, and my point is very brief, that make sure you have the right culture, where change can actually happen. And I can see when we develop that culture together with our clients, and when you have it, anything can be possible, because the organization will be ready for it, they'll be excited, they'll be willing to take risks together, because they have that confidentiality in each other. If you don't have that, nothing will happen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Finn. Thank you so much. Bambang?
Yeah. So especially for HR persons, it's a bit a dilemma, because HR should be the person who is disciplined, have all the operating procedures, the SOP is everywhere. So you have to follow all the procedure, but at the same time, you have to be creative, innovative, follow the technology. So at the other hand, you have to celebrate, you have to communicate, and you also have to see the fear of the control that maybe some of the people in the organizations feel when they get into the journey of the adoptions.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Bambang. Thank you, Finn, for sharing your insights, your experiences, and thank you so much for being so authentic with what works, what doesn't work, and sharing a lot of your insights with all of us. I think it's been fantastic. I haven't even realized that we've been in the show for such a long time, but it's been really, really. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing your stories and for making this conversation so meaningful to all of us.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for your aspiration to become better and better HR professionals and really create a higher impact to your business. And we want to partner with you to help you doing that. So next week, we'll welcome our next panelist for one more conversation. Feel free to share it with your friends, your colleagues. Make sure that as many people can benefit from these conversations, because it's a great opportunity to get the time from leaders from across the world to share their experiences. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us. A quick reminder, this conversation is also a lineup for our TechHR conference. As all of you know, will happen in Singapore this year in Marina Bay on 28th of February. So we encourage you all to come to our website, techhrconference.com, to see the event and join us physically. While this is a virtual opportunity to learn, it's also a great opportunity to be together under one roof and not only learn from leaders like Bambang and Finn, but also get exposed to the technologies that are available and the startup community that is also innovating a lot on the HR technology space. So join us all in February in Singapore, and look forward to welcome you all. All right, so this is the end of our show today. And please, the team will be sharing some feedback. Please feel free to give us feedback on how we improve the show, and have a great day ahead. Thank you very much.